if we could get the tape back on, I know the mics are on, but is the tape running? I think Mars went to duplicate an amendment, but the tape is on?
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to come back to order. And members, just quickly, I think everyone in the room knows, Representative Davids and I and folks from the Department of Revenue and House Research have all been kind of working through a few little last technical things here. So pardon the staff while they really continue to work on the items we have them working on at the moment. But we're going to go ahead, and I will move that House File 1777 be referred as amended to Ways and Means when we get there. That's the motion, to refer it to Ways and Means. And I just want to, just really quickly before we vote on this bill, thank all the members bipartisanly on this committee and throughout the legislature who carried legislation to address these tax cuts for middle class Minnesotans and to do some business-to-business tax repeals. And, you know, as Representative David said, there's not every single solitary thing in here, but it's a great start. I'm very much aware that there are some in the legislature who would like to do more tax cuts and some who would like to do less. But I think this is a great place to be. The governor is very supportive. And in fact, if you noticed yesterday, he was hoping that the legislature could send him these tax cut provisions by March 14th. So in an effort to get that going, we know the forecast doesn't come out till tomorrow. So we do want to address that, you know, certainly to let the minority know that if the forecast doesn't appear the way we think and hope, all of us, I think that it might tomorrow, this bill still needs to go through Ways and Means, so we can certainly make changes at that time, or we could ask Ways and Means to vote it back to us. So we have some options there, but the reason we want to take it up before we even see the forecast tomorrow is just to process the bill through Ways and Means. We have a 24-hour rule, and then to get it up on the floor is just going to take some time. And why are we hurrying? You know, for the public, we're hurrying because the public is filing their taxes right now, and we need to get federal conformity taken care of right now. And then we also are able, due to the situation we're in financially now, to address some of the business-to-business items, and we want to do those as quickly as well. So I'm just going to mention a few highlights. All the members have the bills. Pretty much everything everybody carried forward is in there, but if you have a specific question, we'll ask the staff to answer your question. But the bill, again, is, you know, we think has broad bipartisan support. There's $111 million for middle-income married filers in tax cuts. This is increasing the standard deduction for married filers, which we call in the tax committee the marriage penalty fix. 650,000 Minnesota families will see an average tax cut of $115 from this provision, and the vast majority of families that claim the standard deduction make less than $75,000. $36 million is in this bill in tax cuts for low-income working families, increasing phase-out range for the working family credit to match the federal earned income tax credit, and we'll have 50,000 working families see an average decrease in their taxes of $300. There will be $26.4 million of tax cuts for students, parents paying for college, and students paying off loans. There are a number of education-related provisions, including qualified tuition and related expenses. These are just the highlights of the bills, member. I'm not going to go through them all. $7.2 million in tax cut for homeowners that refinanced or had a short sale. This is the exclusion of discharge for indebtedness income. $3.9 million in tax cuts for new homeowners. This is the mortgage insurance premium deduction. 80,000 new homeowners will see tax cuts due to that provision. $1.8 million in tax cuts for Minnesota families with dependents. 26,000 families with household incomes below $38,570 will see a tax cut. $1.1 million in tax cuts for 60,000 teachers. That's the classroom expense deduction for educators. $6.7 million for businesses to make their tax filing simpler for businesses, and $4 million in tax cuts to charitable contributions. Additionally, and many members bipartisanly worked very hard on this, all three business-to-business taxes that were imposed last year will be repealed. And what we're going to do, and we're going to talk about this in amendment, is one doesn't need a refunding mechanism because it hasn't started. One will have a refunding mechanism, and if the will of this committee is to do one of the amendments, we would, instead of using the refunding mechanism on the telecom, we would take that money and invest it in the telecom broadband issue that bipartisanly people have worked on here. So we do want to talk about that in amendment form. So with that, that's before us, and we have 3 amendments. I would like to first move the A4, and this is a very small technical amendment, if I understand it. And I'm going to ask Mr. Michael, or whoever the right person is, to tell us what the A4 is. Mr. Michael?
Madam Chair, I think this is purely a technical change, and it clarifies with regard to a cross-reference on the disallowance of itemized deductions that the Department of Revenue, in looking over the language, pointed out to us.
Okay, so all in favor of the, is there any public testimony on the A4? Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. The amendment's adopted. And I want to apologize. I meant to, before doing that, ask Representative Davids to share his thoughts with this, with all of us on this bill, because I really do want to thank you. This has been a bipartisan effort to move this bill along. So Representative Davids.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and I would just, first of all, like to thank you and commend you for House File 1777. As you'll see, there's a couple amendments coming forward, and we'll see how those go. But overall, I'm very well pleased with where this is headed and the speed that we have here, because I think of the utmost importance is the speed here, because as of 2 days ago, I think we heard that 29% of tax returns have already been filed, and I am certainly very well pleased with the direction we're taking here, and look forward to working with you. And I thank you for including the Minority Caucus in on this bill.
Thank you. Okay, so the next amendment, I believe, and I think I heard you say, Representative Davids, you have some too, is the A10 amendment, and that is a handwritten amendment that Mr. Michael just did. Is that back from duplicating? If it is. Okay, here we go. And Mr. Michael, if you want to tell us what the A10 is, I think this is a really some of the cost that goes for the department in administering all these changes, particularly as it relates to amended returns. Mr. Michael.
Madam Chair, the A10 amendment essentially appropriates for fiscal 14 and 15 $1.2 million to the department, which is their preliminary estimate of the cost of administering the provisions of the bill, both the redoing of the income tax system to reflect the conformity provisions and the payment of refunds under the sales tax. I think this is obviously a work in progress by the department, and it may be that in Ways and Means the number would need to be adjusted.
Thank you. And I should mention that Representative Carlson and I and Representative Davids have had a little bit of a conversation about this, that if this isn't right or doesn't work, then we all are on Representative Carlson's committee and we can adjust it if need be, but we have a preliminary estimate now on the cost of administering the bill from the department. So if everyone's comfortable with that, is there testimony on the A10? Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. The A10 is adopted. Then I have one more, and then I know Representative Davids, you mentioned something, and that is to just have a discussion with the committee on the A9. This is a concept that House Research just has been working with the department on how to do these refunds, and as you think through, if you refund some of the, if you refund the telecom money, where does that go, and what is the telecom folks, what have they been asking the legislature of? And actually, Representative Davids knows a lot more about this than I do, because I don't serve on the committee that deals with this issue of trying to expand broadband across the state and trying to get everybody access. And what that committee has been bipartisanly bringing forward repeatedly is money to get that done. This would take the refunds and instead do that, I guess, effectively. And I'm going to ask Ms. Dalton, it would pass on more sales tax cuts to that industry to build out the network. So I'm going to ask Ms. Dalton just to describe the A9 and the concept here. Again, this was just brought forward this morning. I've had brief conversations with folks here and with the Department of Revenue, and if the committee just doesn't want to do it, then we just don't have to do it. But I think it's a pretty good policy and saves taxpayers a lot of money. So Ms. Dalton, and maybe if Mr. Michael has more to add after that, if you can just talk to us about this whole concept. Ms. Dalton.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, before I talk about what we're doing to telecom, I think it's good just to talk about what we are doing in the majority of the language, lines 1.3 to 1.5 and 1.11 to 1.27 is the refund mechanism for refunds of sales tax paid on all of the repair, the business-to-business minus the telecom. And basically, this language was worked out with the department. The department wants to provide maximum options for purchasers to get their refund. So they have essentially 3 ways they can apply for the refund. They can either do it by working with their vendor. Their vendor can make the application for the refund and then refund it back to the purchasers. Or the purchasers can do it directly, either through an existing law or through a mechanism that's being provided in the second part of this amendment. So it basically provides maximum flexibility to apply for those refunds. What Representative Lenczewski has been talking about regarding telecom is contained in lines 1.6 through 1.10. The original DE1 amendment had a retroactive effective date for the telecom capital equipment, and instead of doing that, we are going to a prospective date of June 30th, 2014. So there would be no refunds paid on that equipment, but we are expanding the capital equipment exemption to include the wire, cable, fiber, poles, and conduit. So this would be an expansion of their tax exemption moving forward, but there would be no refunds paid for this 1 year.
Mr. Michael or Ms. Dalton, you want to add further on the policy? I mean, and the folks who sit on that committee can chime in. This is what they've been asking for, is these tax exemptions, the telecom folks, bipartisanly, to build out the network. So we would be able to pay for those tax cuts instead. Mr. Michael.
We do not have a revenue estimate on what the cost is of expanding the exemption to include the fiber and the wires and conduit and so forth. Our expectation is that that will be less than the cost of the $33 million and change savings by not paying refunds. The concept then is to take the balance of that money and to put it into whatever broadband grant program is adopted as part of the supplemental budget, so that the balance of the money would then go out essentially in targeted grants to expand broadband. So if there are savings as a result of, in other words, if the expanded exemption does not use up all the $33 million, the balance then the concept is that would go for broadband grants.
If we can just have a discussion about that, and I just want to bring members of this committee back to how many authors we've had come to that table bipartisanly and ask for that broadband sales tax exemption for the network. That's really what we'd be paying for. So, and it's been very bipartisan. So, just think about that. So, Representative Runbeck.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I'm following, but would the sales tax exemption apply to private sector entities installing the broadband as well as municipalities?
Ms. Dalton.
Madam Chair, Representative Runbeck, it would apply to any telecom providers and, internet providers.
Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So when you say that the extra money would go into broadband grants, is that going to go then through the Office of Broadband, and are they going to be taking an administrative cut out of that, or how does that work mechanically wise?
Ms. Dalton or Mr. Michael? I think we would have that committee work on that, but Mr. Michael or Ms. Dalton?
Madam Chair, Representative Anderson, the chair is correct that the parameters of that program, what the administrative costs are, would have to be determined by whatever committee has jurisdiction over it. The idea is simply that any savings would then be added to whatever that program would be.
Do others have thoughts on this? Because we didn't, we've certainly heard those bills, and we had, in fact, some of the telecom authors who wanted to turn off the B2B. Some had a refund and some didn't. The bill I marked up had a refund, but now this would change that instead to pay for different permanent tax cuts for the industry. So I think more thoughts on that. Representative Liebling?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And, one of the things that I think is an issue whenever we do refunds is obviously the cost of doing a refund. And that, we already had some discussion about that with this amendment that Mr. Michael wrote up for us. And so I think that if we whenever we actually refund money, we're actually, I would call it wasting some money in the administrative process of doing that. So I think we get more bang for our buck if we can direct the money like this rather than taking going through the process. And I wanted to see if Mr. Michael had any estimate, and I know that this amendment we did was just an estimate, but any estimate of what the actual refund costs we might be saving if we go the way this amendment is proposing.
And Mr. Michael, before you answer, I want to put on the record, a note has been sent up from fiscal, and I should have said it this way, we should have covered it. The A-10 is one-time money. It is not ongoing money to the department. It's a one-time appropriation to administer this bill, so that $1 million or whatever would not recur. So, Mr. Michael.
Madam Chair, and we'll add language to that amendment to make it clear that that is a one-time and not ongoing appropriation. Representative Liebling, I think the department's administrative cost of this, I think the overall of the sales tax exemption refunds are about in the range of $100,000 is what they're estimating. There aren't probably going to be a huge number of refunds that are actually paid to the telecom companies, so the savings on that are going to be probably very small. I think more what you need to think about is when you pay refunds to these telecom companies, so for example, if you send a refund check to Verizon or AT&T or Comcast, there's no guarantee that they're going to use that money to reinvest in Minnesota. It's more likely that it's just money that's going to go into the general corporate treasury and, be used any way the corporation uses it. By instead taking this money and saying, we're going to give you tax reductions if you buy more fiber in Minnesota, or alternatively, we will help you actually pay for broadband in unserviced area, it's more likely that that money will actually go to telecom investment in Minnesota than if you simply write AT&T or Comcast a check.
Okay.
Representative Liebling.
Thank you, Mr. Michael. Well, I like that idea. To be able to take that money and make sure that it actually goes into helping Minnesotans, especially in rural parts of the state where broadband is really needed, that infrastructure is really needed. As opposed to giving the money back to Comcast and those big multinational corporations and let them spend it however they want, I think that's kind of an easy choice for me. I'm going with the Minnesotans.
Representative Graskowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess I would have a question along that. I know over the summer with this new tax, it was August or September, and I bought a charger for my cell phone and paid this tax on that, and I'm not Comcast. And I'm wondering if there are other people that aren't Comcast that are also not going to get their money back given this.
And Ms. Dalton or Mr. Michael, maybe you can talk about how if we don't do this, and we don't have to, we could do it just as a straight-up refund. How would Representative Drazkowski ever get that refund? Would he ever get that refund? And I think he would not. But we'll have Ms. Dalton and Mr. Michael tell you if we don't add the A9, if we just do refunds as we were talking about when we had the hearing the other day. Ms. Dalton.
Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Garofalo.
Representative Drazkowski, this provision would never affect an individual. This is for capital equipment for the companies to invest in making essentially the backbone, doing the things that get you to, so you can actually use your cell phone. It would not apply to your cell phone or your cell phone charger or your router within your house. Those are not capital investments by the industry into that. So that would not ever be exempt under this.
Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Ms. Dalton, I do remember paying the tax on my cell phone charger. It had it itemized right on the receipt.
Yes.
And so I'm curious with what we see in front of us now with this additional amendment, et cetera, and kind of the tentative proposal to go down this route, will, in Representative Garofalo, I don't want the money from you, I want it from the government. But the question is, will people like me throughout Minnesota get their refund for the money that was taken away from them for their cell phone chargers?
Ms. Dalton?
Madam Chair, Representative Lenczewski, your charger for your cell phone was taxable before the 2013 session and will continue to be taxable into the future. It's always been taxable. That is a personal
Business to business.
purchase. It is not a capital investment by the industry. For farmers or people who paid sales tax on repair labor, if you were a company who had cell phones, for instance, repaired, and you paid repair labor on that cell phone and it was a business expense, you can get a refund, and there are 3 different mechanisms for you to get that refund. It would be either by working back through your vendor, the person who you purchased the repair service from, or you could make the request for refund directly to the department.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Ms. Dalton, and as always, you come through with shining colors, and it's unfortunate. I'm sure there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of Minnesotans like me that are not aware of all the plethora of taxes that we have placed upon them, continuing at every corner to extract the money from them without their knowledge. Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Representative Davids, please.
at that point, I don't think there's millions of Minnesotans like Representative Drazkowski.
Further discussion on this idea, because again, we don't have to do it. We can just do the refunds, or we can do this. I just have noticed for many years this committee bipartisanly has tried to figure out how to get that done, and this would get that done. But, further thoughts. I mean, I don't want to proceed if people don't like it. So, yes, Representative Garofalo.
I promise I'm not going to speak on the amendment, but bipartisanly is not a word. Stop saying it.
Yes, it is.
No,
Look
it's
it
not.
up.
It's not a word. I just looked it up at dictionary.com. Bipartisanly is not a word. Sorry.
But when you do something,
In a bipartisan manner.
I'm not using it as a noun. It's an adverb. Yes. Anyway. Maybe I'm not sure if the industry is here and wants to comment on that, but, I mean, are there folks from the telecom group who are here who want to comment on that? Anybody want to say they're, against doing this? Because I think if not, we'll go forward. I mean, we could, please, yes, I see. I think Comcast is here. Welcome to the committee.
While we're
Representative Runbeck.
Our indecision, ambivalence may be partly due to the fact there's not a lot of money, stored up. What's the sum we're talking about that was
It's
collected?
$33 million on the spreadsheet for the refunds in this area.
Telecom.
So it would instead be, I think the industry has been trying to find a way for many years to get about $25 million in tax cuts to build out the networks. And I guess there's one thing that really hasn't come up in this room, but I have heard it a half hour before I came in this room, is that, that it would, I think it's fair to say it would disproportionately benefit greater Minnesota, because that's where it's not been built out. But, I personally don't begrudge the fact that I live where things work really well, and I want the rest of the state to have that same sort of access that we have in the metro. So it isn't really a problem in the metro, so it would kind of help outstate Minnesota more. But, our Minnesotans need this kind of access. So welcome to the committee. We'll see what you might have to add to this.
Madam Chair, my name is Allison Hartle. I'm State Director of Government Affairs at Comcast. And my colleagues in the telecom industry, unfortunately, are off at other hearings right now, and I am the sole representative of a very united industry on the sales tax exemption on telecom, as you heard on Tuesday when Mike Martin and Brent Christensen testified. This is the first opportunity that we've had to hear this proposal. It's very creative, and at this time, I'm not able to make a comment. I think it's very creative, and I look forward to getting back to my colleagues in the telecom industry and seeing what their reaction is to it.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Hartle, and I appreciate that, and it was just thought of today, so.
Yeah.
And we're feeling the pressure to get these tax cuts moving because people are filing. I guess I'm going to suggest, and we'll just see if the vote goes down, that we vote on it, and if it passes, we have to go through Ways and Means still, and if people feel strongly that that's not the right thing to do, we can reconsider that in Ways and Means, and then, of course, there's always the floor, too. But I think it's this committee who understands what the last many chairs on both sides of the aisle have been pushing for, because they come to this committee and ask for those tax cuts. And those chairs who have been trying to expand broadband are not able to provide those policies they want, because it has to be the tax committee. So I'm just going to go ahead, unless there's more, and just we'll vote on it and see what happens. Thank you, Ms. Hartle. Representative Loon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just a question to make sure I fully understand. So the amendments that you're proposing would keep the tax in place until the end of this fiscal year, and then would convert to adding this to the equipment upfront sales tax exemption. Is that correct?
Ms. Dalton.
Madam Chair, Representative, that is correct. It would essentially change it on the normal time when we make changes to sales taxes, and there would be no refunds, but it would expand the exemption from what it was prior to the 2013 session.
Representative Drazkowski, and before, I just think it's okay if we vote this down. I don't think we need a roll call. I think people should just vote their conscience, and we'll just, decide if we think that's good or not. And I just hate to see the Ways and Means people sorting through this, because they're really not that familiar with this issue. No offense, Representative Carlson and others. but they don't hear all those bills from folks who want these things expanded. So, Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Representative Loon.
No,
I
I'm
apologize.
sorry. I just wanted to kind of finish the thought, and I apologize, Representative Drazkowski. Well, just, in overall concept, and I appreciate Ms. Hartle's comments, and it looks like the industry is looking at this, and it sounded like they were, favorable to the concept. But just a concern I have is, if adequate funds have been collected per the plans to provide grants and that to expand broadband into the rural areas, is it necessary to continue to collect the tax remaining? I know we're acting with some urgency to try to, repeal some of these taxes and that, and, my overall concern would just be that we're not taking more than necessary through this, so.
I hear you. Ms. Dalton or Mr. Michael, hearing what Representative Loon said, could you turn the tax off right away, and then we would later get a revenue estimate? I hear what you're saying. You don't want to vote to keep it going, right?
Correct.
So, could we end it more immediately?
Madam Chair, one of the reasons June 30th is normally picked for all of ours is because of Streamlined basically requires a 90-day notice. However, I don't think anyone is going to take us up as in violation of Streamlined because we granted it earlier than that. It is a limited industry. If you did it day after final enactment, the likelihood is you already have some contracts or things that are going on, and we're going to end up doing some refunds anyhow. However, these are fairly large refunds for telecom industries, and so they can probably apply for a refund under the current law anyhow. So if you want to make it day after final enactment or beginning April 1st, those are things that are very possible.
Representative Loon, thoughts?
Thank you. Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and I appreciate that explanation from Ms. Dalton. And I guess, I would just ask if you would entertain an oral amendment to make that change. I don't know how the rest of the committee feels, but I would feel a little bit better about knowing that we're not continuing this. But I understand, I guess, with the streamlined sales tax, we have certain processes and commitments we need to follow as well. So.
Well, Representative Loon, I think maybe they can come up with that for you, and you could add it, because I don't think any of us wants to be in the gotcha situation there. The equipment repair is the June, because they are going to get refunds in this bill. But this would be a unique thing, and I think you've thought of a good hybrid if Ms. Dalton wants to come up with a an amendment to this for you. And if it's okay, I'll go to Representative Davids then while they work on that. Representative Davids. Oh, Ms. Dalton, I'm sorry.
Madam Chair, Representative Loon, what we could do, and I would recommend doing it for, how many days does March have? 31. Thank you. I'd do it for for sales and purchases made after March 31st, because then you've done a calendar quarter, and that's another requirement under Streamline, is that you do changes on calendar quarters. So that's the very next start of a calendar quarter. So if you want to, on page 1, line 10, instead of June 30th, delete June 30th and insert March 1, that would be March 31, that would be the amendment.
So that's Representative Loon's motion, is that right, Representative Loon?
That's correct, Madam Chair.
Okay, so I think to get this in front of us, that at least with that, if we can all discuss that motion. Is Ms. Manzi telling us that that won't work? Ms. Manzi's telling us that that won't work. So let's go on for a second until we get it to work. Representative Davis.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and to the Loon motion, I understand where we're trying to go here, but
Yes, she can.
I get very sensitive when we start messing with streamline sales tax. That's one of my issues I'm concerned about, so I'd have a question for Ms. Dalton, but she's
Okay.
kind of busy right now.
Okay. Well, we'll go to Representative Drazkowski while we think through that, because I see the point here. I think that's a good one. Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just curious. I mean, we've developed a lot of, a very good direction with a lot of this bill, and then questions about some of the details. Is there an urgency to the point that we have to do this today? We're in our second committee meeting, and I appreciate the expeditious approach, but would it pay for, on behalf of Comcast and our understanding and the researchers and others, to wait until our next meeting to really finalize this package? And I did, Madam Chair, hear you suggest that there's an urgency that's being driven by people, and you referred to pressure. So I'm kind of wondering where that's coming from.
Well, I don't know if you were here, maybe right at the beginning, but the governor, I mean, I would have liked, we passed federal conformity last year, and we didn't prevail on that. So we felt it was important last year. And I think many people know, we can all do the why'd you raise taxes if you didn't need them kind of thing. But I think the House has been pretty clear, at least majority, that we weren't too big of fans of going there, and now that there's money with the surplus, we do want to repeal the B2Bs. The federal conformity is very much an urgency, and this bill is traveling, we're putting these two together. But the more immediate pressure is, for this committee, we could go to another committee, but that would be next week, and we're hoping to have Ways and Means take up the tax bill on Monday, because we have to get through Ways and Means to get to the floor. If we do that, we can't even pass the B2B repeals and the federal conformity on Monday, because we have a 24-hour rule that the bill from Ways and Means has to lay on the desk, so the earliest we could see it on the House floor is Thursday. So that does feel like, I don't feel like we're going too fast, but I admit, this is a concept that we didn't discuss, and I'm willing to just completely drop it, but I think it makes so much sense for many people that a lot of legislators have carried legislation on this, particularly outstate and on both sides of the aisle. And it's just different tax cuts, I guess, is how I'm thinking about it, but we could drop it all together. So.
Thank you.
Okay. So, Ms. Dalton, Representative Davids has a question for you, and then we also want to get back to Representative Loon's potential amendment to the amendment.
Thank you, and this is actually to the amendment here, but first of all, to Representative Drazkowski's comments, I just kind of feel like I feel the need for speed. We need to get moving here. This is, in my mind, something that we need to go at warp speed. I was kind of thinking of Star Trek when Captain Kirk says to Scotty, give me more, and he says, I can't give you any more, Captain. Well, we have to give them more on this. We have to give Minnesotans more on this, because, so we need to get this moving. But to Ms. Dalton, to the amendment that we're on, that dates me to Star Trek, doesn't it? Give me more. Yeah. Can't give you any more, Captain. I'm very concerned about violating streamlined sales tax. I don't want to do that, and that means we go till June 30th. Fine. And you mentioned one of the outs was maybe going quarterly. We're not going to be given 90 days notice, which I'd like to do, but do you believe that if we do the quarterly thing, that how will they react to us violating the streamlined sales tax?
Ms. Dalton?
Madam Chair, Representative Davids, I am guessing, I mean, somebody would have to basically file something to say we violated it. I really don't think that there's anybody out there that's going to file a complaint with Streamlined that we didn't do a 90-day notice, particularly since it is an exemption. It is not a tax. I mean, it's not a tax increase, and I think people who have objected to changes in tax law that didn't get 90 days notice have been related to tax increases. This is a tax exemption.
And Madam Chair, so we're actually going the other way. So hopefully, I mean, you know, it's not that I'm paranoid. It just seems like everybody's after me, and I'm really and I'm really concerned that somebody could file something. And I can't really, since we're going the other way, I can't really see it happening. But I just want to make the committee aware that that's something we really don't want to do. And the reasoning that they probably wouldn't file a complaint is probably valid.
Okay. Representative Loon, or thoughts for Representative Loon as she considers whether or not she wants to do an amendment to the amendment. Ms. Dalton, after Ms. Manzi came in.
Madam Chair, Representative Loon, Ms. Manzi actually made a valid point, which is that you cannot do an amendment to an amendment to an amendment. But what you can do...
Process.
But what you can do is, as the author of the A9 amendment, you may choose to incorporate her suggested change.
I will incorporate it if she's interested in it. And first, I think she wants to know exactly what it is that she might be interested in, Ms. Dalton. So can you kind of go through that again for Representative Loon and how that would work?
All right. Madam Chair, basically what you would do on line 10 is incorporate the change March 31st instead of June 30th. The other thing that Ms. Templin was pointing out is this means there wouldn't be a $33 million savings in refunds, because the refunds were pretty much predicated on there being a year's worth of refunds. So this would expand the base, the tax exemption earlier, and it would reduce the refunds. So it's going to also then cut how much money is available for potential grants.
Thoughts, Representative Loon?
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. And am I correct? And I think I heard you say that the goal roughly was, or maybe perhaps the industry was looking for 25 million. And I mean, do we have any idea, I guess, about what's been collected so far, and if moving the date would have an impact on that?
Yeah, maybe the legislators who've worked on this can talk about this. I guess I'm hesitant to say it's the industry per se. They are Republican and Democratic legislators who continue to carry these bills. I think Representative Anzels has carried one in this committee before. I don't know what your side of the aisle proposed last year in broadband. I think we're looking at, I don't know. But I do know bipartisanly we have particularly outstate legislators ask for these exemptions to build out the system. And, we haven't been able to pay for those tax cuts. So it is for the industry, but it's really for our citizens who are the beneficiaries of this. But Representative Loon, is there someone on the committee who feels they could talk about this? Somebody out there who could answer Representative Loon's question? Representative Loon.
Well, Madam Chair, I would, just because there seems to be some questions, and I know that, the bill's going to have to go to Ways and Means, I mean, I'd be happy to, well, I guess it's not officially an amendment, so it would be incorporating language, but we could put this off to Ways and Means and try to answer some of those questions if that would make members feel more comfortable. I think Representative Davids raised a valid point, and that, we haven't taken a vote. Not many people have spoken about this, but I'm assuming most of us are in agreement that we don't want to collect more than is necessary, but we don't know exactly what this change would mean with regards to that, and also other tax policies that we have to follow.
Well, it's still before us. I'm just going to go ahead and incorporate the change that you were discussing with Ms. Dalton, so we're not violating an amendment to an amendment to amendment. So it's here. And just further discussion on if people want to pursue this. I hear what you're saying. I worry that the Ways and Means Committee may not be the place to do that, but do other people, maybe, I don't want to put Representative Schoen, yes, please, and I don't want to put Representative Carlson on the spot, but I do want to ask him, too, what he's thinking, because ultimately it's going to come to his committee. Representative Schoen.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to clarify where we were. So we're moving up to March 31st versus June 30th?
That would,
That's the
in this
basis
amendment.
of what we're doing?
Well, now, we've got March 31st, I haven't incorporated it, but now we have to decide if we want to do refunds or instead give tax cuts to build out the, to do all the broadband work that people have wanted, which they've really asked for through tax cuts, through exemptions on the tax for their materials. And we would instead pay for that as opposed to refunds.
So, Madam Chair, we're doing that in two parts. That particular discussion, we're asking the question of whether we're going to do the build-outs or the rebates to the companies. Is that the case?
That'll be one vote on the, we've now incorporated on the A9. And I mean, again, I think that's just up to this committee, and I understand we're feeling pressure, but we have an opportunity to maybe make something work here. Representative Carlson, can you comment on what your thoughts are, since your committee's next in line?
Yeah, Madam Chair, you sort of tongue-in-cheek, I think, indicated that normally this kind of issue wouldn't necessarily be before Ways and Means, but there are people on that committee, I'm sure, that have dealt with it just by the proliferation of bills that you mentioned. And if members of the public or the industry want to comment about it, we would be open to that as well.
Okay.
But both you and Representative Davids are there. I've heard the discussion here and listened to the bills earlier, so I think we've got some people with background on it. But,
Okay. Okay,
I think we can handle it.
Okay, so Representative Liebling, then Dabney. Representative Liebling.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I feel pretty strongly that we ought to be voting on this here in the tax committee. This is a tax provision. We know that when we send the tax bill along, things can get modified in Ways and Means. They get modified on the floor. I mean, we know nothing we do here is final, but we're the tax committee. I think that this is a really great amendment, whether we modify it according, well, I guess it's been modified with the timing and all that, but I think, as was explained by staff, I mean, this is really about whether we're going to take some funding that's available and send it back in the form of refunds to these big telecom companies that can spend it all over the world, or whether we're going to take it and put it right into some benefits for Minnesotans that we've been looking to fund for a very long time, especially rural Minnesotans. And we all know, I'm not on Sheldon Johnson's committee either, but we all know how important broadband is to the state. I mean, this is true economic development. This is, and I know there's some concern that it's mainly rural, and I do think that we need to think about the whole state, but this is a great step forward. And I think it's so important for us here in the tax committee to take a stand on this that I'd like to ask for a roll call, because I think every member should be not only willing to vote here in the tax committee, but willing to go on record whether they want to support building out broadband in rural Minnesota, or whether they'd rather use the money to send it out as refunds to large telecom companies.
Okay, so Representative Liebling requests a roll call. Then it's Dabney, Davids, and Garofalo. We're still going to discuss. We do want to vote this bill out before the committee ends so that we make it, as we've stated, to Ways and Means and then on its way. Representative Dabney, then Davids, and Garofalo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to speak in favor of the building out of broadband. Representative Liebling just touched on it as well, but I think there's a couple of dimensions here. There's an opportunity that's been created, inadvertently perhaps, but here's a creative way to seize an opportunity to achieve a goal that's been around for a number of years, that's received some recent attention through recent studies. It does provide greater commercial opportunity, so entrepreneurs in greater Minnesota in particular who rely on broadband or need broadband to be able to develop their business concepts may do so. We'll have an enhanced ability to do so under this. There's also an educational dimension. There are school districts in greater Minnesota that want to offer opportunities to their students, but because of smaller number of students, the financial end of that doesn't work as well, but they can share a French teacher, they can share a teacher and use modern technology to do that if they've got the connections. And we're enhancing then educational opportunities at an affordable rate in school districts that otherwise would not be able to offer equal opportunities to larger school districts, whether it's larger school districts in greater Minnesota or in the metro area. So I think there's a lot of benefit for the state, as well as I thought Mr. Michael's point that if we just give them refunds, it goes into the corporate treasury. If we create a positive tax environment for them, it builds Minnesota. And I think those some pretty great advantages to that approach. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Representative Davids.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I just want to go on the record as completely agreeing with Representative Liebling's comments. That being said, I respect, I'm not trying to hurt you in any way, but I don't know if we really, I mean, any member can ask for roll call. I really don't know if we need that, if you'd be willing to pull that back, because I don't know of anybody on this side that's going to vote no, and it kind of slows things down a little bit, But Representative Liebling, I think, hit it right on the head. I think as a tax committee, we need to put this in some form on today, and we can talk about March 31st or June 30th at a later time in Ways and Means. And so I hope we'll at least vote on the amendment.
Okay.
As amended.
Okay. Representative Garofalo.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair and members. A couple of things. First of all, Representative Liebling and Davney, I appreciate your newfound enthusiasm for making broadband more cost-effective and relevant in this state. The taxpayers of Minnesota sure could have used that logic last May when you raised taxes on it and you had a government-imposed mandate to make telecommunications infrastructure more expensive. So I appreciate that you've adopted the conservative Republican position on this issue and now oppose the bill that you voted for last session. Second of all, Madam Chair, I feel very strongly about this amendment and the other amendments that it really doesn't matter. Because like this issue, like many other issues, are going to be decided by the Senate Democrats. They're not on the ballot this year. It's not going to be the House Republicans or the House Democrats or even the governor. The Senate Democrats are going to be in charge of this decision, and they're going to decide it for us whether we have an extensive debate or a short-term debate. And third and finally, it seems to me that this committee is ignoring the reality of what the real problem was last session. The problem last session with one-party control is the House DFL made the decision that they wanted to finish on time at any cost. It didn't matter what the policy was. And it seems to me that leverage the Senate has in the DFL, the House DFL, is even stronger this year because it's an election year. And so the longer this committee ignores the problems of last session, which were that you wanted to finish at any price, so that's why they got the Senate office building, their $90 million palace, they got the executive pay, they got their additional benefits from lobbyists, and all the other perks the Senate's wanted. The leverage they have this session is even greater. So if we want to do something, let's pass staggered terms or let's pass a unicameral, but at the end of the day, these guys ain't on the ballot and they don't really care what we're going to say, Republican or Democrat.
Are we live?
Representative Earhart, are we on being televised? Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah. Oh, I understand that. Just glad to see your weight
Further discussion on the A9. Is there anyone else on the A9? Public testimony on the A9. Further discussion. If not, we're going to call for the roll call.
Lenczewski?
Yes.
Loeffler?
Yes.
Davids?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
Anzels?
Yes.
Barrett?
Yes.
Benson? Carlson?
Yes.
Davney?
Yes.
Drazkowski?
Yes.
Earhart?
Yes.
Garofalo?
Yes.
Hanson?
Yes.
Lesh?
Aye.
Liebling?
Yes.
Lilly?
Yes.
Loon?
Yes.
Mack?
Yes.
Marquardt?
Yes.
Moline?
Yes.
Myra?
Yes.
Paymar?
Yes.
Peppin?
Yes.
Runbeck? Schoen?
Yes.
Simonson?
Aye.
Slocum?
Yes.
Zellers?
Yes.
I want to say for the record, Representative Benson is excused. He was here. He had to go to another committee, and he's here, but he's excused. 26 ayes, 0 nays. The amendment, the A10 is adopted. Further amendments? Further amendments? Any other amendments, Representative Davids? Do you have any amendments?
I don't have any. There may be
Okay.
some others.
Any others?
Madam
Oh,
Chair?
looks like there are. Yes.
I've got-
Representative Anderson, please.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm sorry. Madam Chair, I have the A5 amendment. I believe it's
A5.
being handed out right now.
Representative Anderson moves the A5. And as that's being passed out, if you want to explain it to us, Representative Anderson.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, if you notice in the bill that's before us here today, it doesn't start the deduction for the marriage penalty until tax year 2014. So what my amendment does is make sure that we take care of that marriage penalty here for tax year 13. There's no reason not to do this. We've heard several comments here today about the urgency and helping out the citizens. I remember, Madam Chair, when you were giving your examples for what's included in this bill, we're talking about 650,000 Minnesota taxpayers that would benefit from the elimination of the marriage penalty, having this as part of the conformity here. And of those, the average decrease in their taxes would be $115. I'm sure that could help out a lot of the 650,000 people that would benefit from having this become effective for tax year 13. So that's what my amendment does. And I do need to make one incorporation into this. This was pointed out to me by staff on lines 11, so 1.11. In front of the "and," there should be a semicolon.
Got it?
And that's it, Madam Chair.
Okay, so Representative Anderson incorporates that change she made on line 1.11.
Wasn't me.
Okay, discussion to the amendment. Members, I will, and Representative Garofalo will be next. I would encourage folks to vote no on this, as much as I agree with you in concept. The House tax bill last year did do exactly this. And for members who voted for that, you did vote to pass on that marriage penalty fix last year. The problem we have, and it's kind of a policy debate here, but to amend all those returns, we would have some people who would pay more to a preparer than they would receive on the amended return. Additionally, the price tag of this bill is one that I really hope to have the Senate agree to. And I think this amendment would add, and we can ask Ms. Templin, but I think it's about 70 or 80 million for this amendment. So I would encourage members to vote no, although I do know that, I've been a supporter of what Representative Anderson has just said, and in fact, the House tax bill did just that. But I think most importantly is going forward, we would not continue to do these one-time retro conformities. We would permanently conform on the marriage penalty in this bill. It will have permanent conformity. Further discussion. It was Representative Garofalo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm hoping we can get a unanimous roll call vote, just like Representative Liebling did, so I'll ask for a roll call on the bill.
Representative Garofalo asked for a roll call.
A couple of things to consider is, number one, there are people who have taken itemized deductions at the, or have interactions with their federal taxes that are causing them to actually have much higher taxes because of the lack of the standard deduction conformity on the local side. And I would just hope that this is not tax cuts for the rich. This is not going after giving what Elida Rockefeller would say would be tax breaks for corporate welfare or whatnot. But this is actually real middle-class families that are being hurt by the lack of action of the legislature last year. So I would hope that members can recognize who's going to get these benefits and why they're needed, and that we'll vote in favor of it to put this money back in people's pockets and continue expanding our economy. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion? And Representative Garofalo, to clarify, you said you wanted a roll call on the bill, or did you mean the amendment?
Said bill.
You said bill. You meant the bill.
I'll ask for both.
Okay. So there is a roll call. Further discussion on the Anderson A5 amendment?
Madam Chair,
Yes, Representative Anderson.
I do want to just point out, as Representative Garofalo mentioned, in your comments in introducing your bill, you said for those that are suffering from marriage penalty, most make under $75,000. So that's who we're talking about here today. And like I said earlier, I'm sure many of them would appreciate receiving a $115 tax break, which is the average. So I'd ask for your support. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Further discussion? Further discussion? If not, we'll take the roll.
Lenczewski.
No.
Loeffler. Davids. Anderson.
Aye.
Anzels.
No.
Barrett.
Yes.
Benson. Carlson.
No.
Dabney.
No.
Drazkowski.
Yes.
Earhart.
Yes.
Garofalo.
Yes.
Hanson. Lesh. Liebling. Lilly. Loon.
Yes.
Mack.
Yes.
Marquardt.
No.
Moline.
No.
Myra.
Yes.
Paymar.
No.
Pepin.
Yes.
Runbeck.
Yes.
Schoen.
No.
Simonson. Slocum.
No.
Zellers.
Yes.
As you know, I had to reduce my bill down to practically nothing. All that was left was...
There being 12 ayes and 15 nays, the A5 does not pass. Further amendments?
Madam Chair, I'd move the A6 amendment.
Representative Garofalo moves the A6. How late do we have this room? Do you know how late we have this room? Okay. Is there a committee after this? Is there a committee after this? Is there a committee in this room after this? Thank you, Representative Garofalo. We're going to try to finish the bill, members, so let's just stay here and see if, I don't know if there's a committee in here next that's going to kick us out, but let's keep going. Representative Garofalo, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'll just ask for a roll call on the A6 amendment. This is the same thing that Representative Anderson referred to. However, this is for the expense limit for dependent care credit. And I would ask for members' support. Again, we're helping out working families here, people that were working class families that were hit with a tax increase last session by the lack of action by the legislature, and I would ask for your support.
Thank you. Discussion. Members, I urge a no vote. Representative Garofalo, I think, has characterized it correctly. And again, this is a provision that we did pass in the 2013 tax bill, where we provided that federal conformity tax benefit from Congress and continuing the dependent care credit in 2013. Of course, we did not ultimately achieve that, but members of the majority know that we did pass that last year. This bill has that provision going forward, but does not have the retro component. And again, we're trying to keep the bill agreeable to the Senate in hopes that, not that I know exactly, Representative Garofalo, how they feel about that particular provision, but I do know that the bill, the bigger it gets, I think it may not get as quick a passage as we'd like. So at this time, and don't disagree with what Representative Garofalo has said, I would urge members to vote no on the A6. Further discussion? If not, roll call has been requested. Clerk will take the roll.
Lenczewski.
No.
Loeffler. No. Davids.
Yes.
Anderson.
Aye.
Anzels.
No.
Barrett.
Yes.
Benson.
No.
Carlson.
No.
Dabney.
No.
Drazkowski.
Yes.
Earhart.
Yes.
Garofalo.
Yes.
Hanson. Lesh.
No.
Liebling.
No.
Lilly.
No.
Loon.
Yes.
Mack.
Yes.
Marquardt.
No.
Moline.
No.
Myra.
Yes.
Paymar.
No.
Pepin.
Yes.
Runbeck.
Yes.
Schoen.
No.
Simonson.
No.
Slocum.
No.
Zellers.
Yes.
There being 12 ayes and 16 nays, the A6 is not adopted. Further amendments? Further amendments? Further amendments? If not, we're going to go ahead and vote. Is there anybody who wants to comment on the bill? I think we heard from everybody last time, but just one last call for public testimony on House File 1777. If not, and there's been a roll call request on the bill? Okay. Doesn't matter either way, but Representative Garofalo withdraws the roll call. And again, the motion is to refer the bill to Ways and Means. So House File 1777 as amended, there's been we've withdrawn. So all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Okay, the bill has passed and it's off to Ways and Means. Thank you, members. We're adjourned.